Parents bring their children into the world with high hopes and great dreams. We also face fears and challenges as our children go out into a very complex and very fast society with influences, temptations, and distractions that have us uncomfortable and sometimes even ending in tragedy. Today on The Question Is with Anthony Portantino, we are going to get emotional and we are going to delve deep into these challenges from a mom who will candidly share her sad and emotional story and a woman who will help us make sense of these challenges facing our teens and our families. It's my hope that after today, a family just might be better prepared to face these challenges. You won't want to miss this show. I first met Hannah Sheklow at a community meeting in La Crescenta where she shared her personal family story in such an open and candid manner that it deeply affected me and it made me want to share it to a wider audience. Hannah is an amazingly brave person. She's a mom and an activist who wants to help others. Also with us today is Ann Ortega, the program coordinator for alcohol and other drug prevention services at the renowned Didi Hirsch Mental Health Services Organization. Are you ready for some frank talk that just might bring a tear to your eye and along the way give us some insights into teenagers, an often misunderstood and hectic herd of cats? So let's ask the question. Hannah, thank you for being here. Ann, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You've had an amazing story. You're so young and you've dealt with so much. Could you share a little bit with us today?
Thank you, Anthony. I had 3 children. 2 years ago, my oldest daughter died of her addiction. She was 13 when she first started using, and her father and I didn't realize it for 3 years. She seemed normal and fine, and one day she came home and confessed her drug use, and our world was completely turned upside down. At that point, she had recently started using heroin, and I believe that she confessed to us because she realized that heroin was not a drug that she was going to be able to step away from. And from the moment we found out she was using, we put her through rehab. We
did everything you could.
We did everything we could. And there was a point at which she seemed to have moved back onto the right path, and to be getting her life together and to be going to college. And then one day she didn't come home. And I was angry at her. And she was supposed to have gone to an AA meeting that night. She was supposed to have come home and done her homework. And when I realized that she had clearly blown everything off, I was angry. And her father and I kept texting her and calling her, and she was non-responsive. And at about 11 o'clock at night, my husband went to sit on the couch and wait for her. And shortly after, I heard the door open and I heard him collapse. And there was a woman at the door who had come to tell us that she was gone. And it has been an absolutely devastating and life-changing experience to lose our perfect, amazing child who was as wonderful to us as anyone's child is. And she's gone, and I miss her every day.
miss her every day. God bless you. Thank you for sharing that. But you're also trying to make sure that other children don't face the same situation, which is, given everything you've been through, just amazing that you're willing and capable to do that. So thank you. Before I go to Ann, my brother committed suicide 3 years ago. And one of the frustrations I have is I took him to an AA meeting, and he walked in the front door and walked out the back door, and then went down the street and tried to, his second attempt. And I always say, I wish I would have walked in the front door with him, but you don't know. You trust and you believe and you hope. And you know, I found out later that he just walked in the front door and saw me drive away and then walked out the back door. So thank you for sharing your perspective, and we've got a lot to talk about today, so thank you. Ann, you deal with this every day in your capacity and your role, and unfortunately this is not a unique situation in today's society. We see many families have children with drug addiction, and some end in tragedy, like Hannah's. How and what do you do in your role at Didi Hirsch, and you know, what are some of the things that you're doing out there and working with Hannah and others?
Well, I'm really happy to be working with Hannah. I think she's amazing for being able to tell her story.
Absolutely. And
share it in the community in the hopes of helping other families. And in our work at Didi Hirsch, we provide universal prevention services. That is, we work within the community. We work also within the school system, providing services in the after-school program. Much of those services are focused on working with children, not only to help them to learn to resist the pressure to use drugs from peers. I think that's a term that we use very commonly, and we identify as one of the major reasons that someone would choose to use drugs. However, what we're finding is that there's internal pressure as well, which really is something that we need to understand, so that when we focus on communication with our children, we can help them not only overcome the pressures that they feel from others, but the pressures that they feel within themselves.
Right. Because some of it is that internal pressure and the self-medication that happens. Big picture, children, mental health, we're not doing very good as a society, are we, dealing with those issues?
It's a complex society, and I think when you look at all of the different influences that our children have today, you're dealing with a lot of different issues that perhaps aren't something that we talked about or that we sought services for in the past. And that's why prevention programs exist, because we're trying to fill those needs. You know, a lot of the time what we talk to parents about and we talk to kids about is communication. I think the key to prevention is communication, not simply in how you talk to your children in terms of making time to talk with them, asking open-ended questions, being able to control your emotions when you're asking kids what they know, what they think they know, what they've heard, what they may have questions about, but also the ability to, as a parent, use reflective listening, where you can paraphrase and understand and repeat back to them. Make sure you really understand what it is that they're experiencing. And on top of that, it's...
No, to be fair, children don't always make it easy for us to do that. I tell my 22-year-old she speaks another language than I do, and certainly text speak. Half the time I have to text back to her and say, what did you just say?
You are absolutely right. And working with teens and preteens, it is another language. And I think part of the message that we try to give parents in prevention is that it is really our responsibility to try to speak that language as well. And that comes in the form of communication, not only what you talk about them, with them, but how you talk to them, in terms of not just giving them the facts about drugs. And that really is, what that means is educating yourself about drugs, the risks, the consequences, but also how to respond to those pressures, both the peer pressure and external pressure that they internalize. You know, help them figure out what they can say if they're offered, brainstorm responses and solutions. But on the other side of it, you know, the goal is really to help them understand not only ways to say no, but also how they can say no without losing those social opportunities, friends. You know, the concept that's really the most important is the internal pressure, precisely because young people may not recognize or understand that, you know, they're the result of external pressures that are felt by everyone at one time or another, and that's not just related to substance use. It can be related to a number of other topics that our kids are facing today in this very complex world. You know, it's generated by an environment created by other teenagers, a teenage culture, and a society that uses drugs, and really a society that uses them as a way to cope. And so that's, I think, the crossover with mental health services.
I think it's important that you said you can't just say don't do it. The conversation has to be much deeper than that. Hannah, when you're talking to other moms and dads out there about your story, what are some of the things that you look them in the eye and say? Because obviously a lot of parents have a lot of denial in, not everybody faces situations as bravely as you are. And so what are some of the things that you share with some of your neighbors and friends and others when you're out there being an activist?
Well, I can actually speak from experience about not being brave and facing subjects and being secretive about what's going on. And I think that when I look back at what I did as a parent, once I knew that my daughter had a problem with addiction, I wasn't open. I kept secrets for her. I kept secrets because of my own shame. And by doing that, I was not able to fully explore resources that would have been available to me. But I also allowed her to hide from her problem. And I think that it's really important to be as open as possible with your children and your family and your community. When I talk to other parents about what I've been through, I'm really clear that there's nothing that I've gone through that is a secret, because I can't help if there is. And I think that that's how you have to live with your children. There are no secrets. There's nothing. You can't raise them to be ashamed. You have to raise them to be open and to hear what they have to say.
So that sense of honesty is probably the biggest theme that you put forth.
Absolutely. I think that it is incredibly powerful and can be an anchor.
Annie, we were talking earlier about signs, and it was interesting because that's sort of the cliche. Everybody wants to know, what are the signs?
Yes.
And you cut me off really quickly and said, but that's not really what this is all about. Why is it that we think of signs, but it's not really addressing the situation? I
think it's human nature that we think of signs, and we want to see what the signs are so that we can know that there's a problem.
Put a Band-Aid on them.
We want to know if there's a problem. Then when we get to what do you do about the problem, we may be a little lost. And I think Hannah really highlights something that we see a lot, is that there are a lot of resources out there, but people don't know how to access them. Right. And I think she really, sends a very—
Or they're unwilling to make the phone call and ask for help.
That too. Yeah. There's still a lot of stigma associated with seeking out and looking for resources, or even the fact that you have a problem in your family. And I think, her focusing on seeking out resources as a parent sets a really good example for our children as well. Because if you are the model and children learn from you and your behaviors, and whether you seek resources or not, whether you ask for help and are honest, we're going to be raising children that do the same. So I think prevention is complex. It's not simply just about looking for the signs, which there are many of. And I think especially when you look at teenagers, a lot of the signs that we point to, whether that's, increased isolation, a change in communication in the household, whether it's secretiveness, or whether it could simply be a change in friends. Sometimes it's a change in interests, a loss in interest in academics or other activities that they participated in. Those are the signs. However, I think those are signs for a lot of different issues that could be going on.
Not necessarily drug addiction or other forms of depression.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, when we come back on The Question Is, we're going to delve deeper. And again, I have a tear in my eye, and so I told everybody it's okay. This show, you can cry all day. Thank you for joining us. We're going to come back and talk more about Hannah's personal story, and Annie's going to give us some more insights, and hopefully some parents and teens will watch this show. So thank you.
Who needs this modern world? I can live just fine out here without the road rage and boy bands. Of course, I might miss my Charter HD with football on ESPN and Walking Dead on AMC. ESPN and AMC. And, well, Shark Week on Discovery HD, but that's all. AMC, ESPN, Discovery, TBS, and Comedy Central HD, but that's it. Except for HBO HD.
Charter now has over 100 HD channels and more brilliant HD shows on demand than ever.
We're back on The Question Is with Anthony Portantino with two amazing women who are doing so much to help families and children. So thank you for coming back and joining us. And Hannah and Annie, thanks for being here. And Annie, in the break we were talking a little bit about communication, and you touched upon it in the first segment, how important it is to just sort of strip away all the pretense and just have an honest communication with our children, with our families. And what are some of the things at Didi Hirsch that you guys are experimenting with and doing that you're excited about?
Well, as a mental health agency, we provide a lot of services to individuals and families. We have mental health services as well as substance abuse treatment services. However, we're really proud of the fact that we collaborate an enormous amount with the community, and that's how our collaboration with Hannah in the Village came about, as well as other programs and community service providers that are offering wonderful services. Because I think, when you talk about communication in the home, you're modeling that communication for what you communicate to the outside world and to your community. And as much as, we may think that we're invested in our community, it really comes down to how much do you participate, how much do you actually know your neighbors, and that's something that was part of the Village's message that we could really hold on to.
Now, we really haven't talked about the Village much. We've used the phrase, but we haven't said what that is. So Hannah, tell us your vision of the Village and the monthly meetings and how you see that as sort of an extension of this community investment.
Well, the Village came about in February. I spoke to my community about what we had gone through with my daughter, and one of the things that became apparent immediately was how much people wanted to talk and be involved and be educated about the dangers in our community, and how easily lost all of these resources that at least in my community, are very readily available. There's a plethora of them, but it's hard to go and find them if you really don't know where to start. So
you're talking about like the teen center and different youth activities and stuff through the high school and
yeah,
Girl Scouts
drug education and prevention, any kind of program like the Girl Scouts. We do have a teen drop-in center. We have a lot of amazing programs, and our schools actually provide a lot of drug education and different types of education, often in partnership with Didi Hirsch. And my friend Miriam and I felt very strongly that we needed to follow up on that need. And so we put together these monthly meetings. We've had, at every meeting, we try to make sure that there are representatives from different parts of the community, whether they're mental health or government or the police coming in and just helping to educate our community on the dangers that are around and how to combat those dangers as a united community, rather than a lot of different people living in their separate homes.
Silos.
Right.
Right. Well, that's where I first met you, was at one of those meetings, and you were right. There were a lot of different people who had never met each other, who were very comfortable asking questions and sharing their perspectives. It was a powerful community meeting, and you do them monthly, and they continue to grow. Annie, you talked about some of the role-playing communication techniques that you and Hannah have been working on for those community meetings. Could you walk us through how they work and how you see them being effective?
Sure. Well, I think when I went to the village meeting my first time, one of the things that Miriam said was, we don't know our neighbors, and we really need to come together and know our neighbors, really function as a community. And one of the things that we talk about in terms of prevention is knowing your children and knowing your children's friends and knowing your children's friends' parents and knowing your neighbors, so that you can more easily call one another, monitor each other's children, share concerns, and find solutions together. And so I think doing a role play and responding to what the parents in this village meeting had to say and their requests is really a great step forward. When we talked about communication role plays, it seemed as though the requests really focused on two different kinds of role play. One is, how do I talk to my kids about drugs? How do I start the conversation? What is it that I tell them? So we're going to be going over that during one of our meetings. The other form of communication that I think parents were really honing in on was, how do I help my child say no? How do I help my child resist the pressures? So that is a different role play, in that one will be talking about how we role playing with our children,
right.
Because there are very specific strategies with which we teach our children to look at how they respond to their peers, their friends who might be offering these new experiences that have to do with drugs and sometimes other issues as well.
That's a hard conversation to have with your kids, because they think the kid who may not be cool is cool for all of the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. How do you explain to your child that the person that they might be hanging out with isn't the best influence without driving them closer to that child? That's
Mm-hmm.
the one that I always struggle with, is you don't want to encourage the relationship, but sometimes by discouraging it, you're encouraging it. What's the solution on that one, if there is one?
Well, I think there's several solutions. I think the first solution is ask questions first. Before you model judgment of that child and tell your child that's a bad kid, I don't like the way he looks or what he's saying or his behavior, ask questions first. So your job is first to ask questions, then listen for the answer. I think the communication that we focus on is using it to understand your child's perspective. What is their perspective? Why is it that they think that child is cool? Why is it that they're interested in that child? And looking at what their goal is in being friends with that child. If their goal is to be friends with someone that is seen as popular, how can you use that goal? That's an understandable goal. How can you change that goal, or how can you help them accomplish that goal without disparaging this other young person and without turning them away by modeling judgment of others?
Right.
I think that's really where the education starts.
You can't see that person again. Don't rush to that one.
Yes. I think sometimes that's the hardest part for adults.
That is very difficult.
We want to judge and we want to say, you don't want to end up like that. Well,
right.
No young person thinks they're going to end up like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to be, cognizant of that and avoiding teasing. Oh, well, look at that kid. I think that becomes a really important part of the communication. And second, we don't want to drive them away by
being too judgmental.
And in that sense, we're teaching them judgment rather than understanding and perspective taking. We want to be able to take their perspective and help them to take somebody else's perspective. So asking open-ended questions, communicating to them about what they see, what they hear, what they think, and then guiding them towards the right choices without being overbearing about it.
Right. And that's something that you try to share with parents when you're out there with the village from your personal perspective.
Very much. It's critical.
Right.
And I try and share it with my 14-year-old who participates in the village.
Right.
That
was terrific, the one I attended to see her there.
It's important, I think, to, as much as I want to be an aid to my community, and not only for the other children in my community, but also for my 2 living children who are growing up and facing everything that they're facing. One of the biggest things that I think I need my daughter to know and ingest and live is the need to be an important part and a contributing part of her community, so that she can care for those around her, care for herself, and expect to be looked out for in return.
It's interesting because young people today, as a group, they're very paradoxical in a way, in that many of them are volunteering and giving a lot of civic engagement in a greater number than past generations, but there's also a cynicism. Many of them are cynical. They're not participating in the political process as much as they are in the civic engagement process, because there's some element of a lack of optimism that just seems to be too prevalent. And maybe it goes back to what you were talking about, that judgmental, that we're teaching a judgmental world that's starting with us. I mean, maybe that's the piece, because some of the things you were saying, I can see my daughter saying back to me, and I'm going, darn, she's right and I'm wrong, because I'm going to make her watch this, or excuse me, I'm going to suggest that she watch this segment with me, because I find myself doing that. I guess it's the quick Italian New Jersey cut to the bottom line in me, but I think you're right, that communication and that questioning and understanding is what's missing often. What else? What do we, if we had a mom and dad in front of us today that was facing this situation at home, what would be the one thing that you would want to say to them? Look them in the eye. If you had 30 seconds to say to a mom and dad, and then I'm going to come back and ask you a different question.
I would say be involved in everything. I read every book that my 14-year-old reads in order to make sure I know what she's interested in. I participate with her life with her friends to the extent that it's not weird. Be engaged. Be engaged in everything that they do, and treat them like they deserve respect, so that they will respond to you with respect. The things that I missed with my oldest daughter were not things that I've ever heard listed as indicators of drug use. She dramatically changed the types of books that she read, and she
was still reading, but just a different genre altogether.
Right. She started reading very dark novels, and even though she was still reading, she was still participating in everything. What the type of sweater she wore, the type of whatever it was, they're small indicators. Everything I look back on that I missed was a small indicator. But I think if I would have recognized how deeply I needed to be engaged, maybe I would have caught something that I missed. And it might not have saved her, but the potential is there that it could have.
Annie, when a teenager comes to see you, what's the first thing you say to them?
Well, it really depends on why it is they're coming to see us. For the most part, we see students that don't have a problem with substance use yet. They may be experimenting, but they're not necessarily addicted. So it really depends on what it is they come to see us about, because I think when we look at the types of prevention that we're really focusing on, it's a universal prevention. So we're really trying to develop life skills, and we're really looking at building their self-efficacy. I think, and this relates back to the comment that you made earlier in terms of we are very cynical, and as adults, I think we struggle daily with our self-efficacy, whether we're good at our job, whether we're being a good parent, whether we're being a good community member, and that translates to our children as well. So we need to be able to build that inside of them. So my questions to them usually are, how do you feel about your place in the world?
Wow. Well, I don't know about you, but I learned a lot, and I'm now your biggest fan. So thank you for sharing, and thank you. Self-efficacy, engagement, community, questioning, listening. I need to learn all those things. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective, and thank you for tuning in to The Question Is with Anthony Portantino today. I hope you learned as much as I did.